What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another week of what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, imagining this podcast, I kind of just thought about us with the clown makeup, just painting it on our faces as the tears stream down, banking on a Kanye album this weekend. It didn't come, did it?
Did not come. I wasn't confident it was going to come. I was just hoping it really would for content programming purposes here at youtube.com/nostalgiapod because this is a lighter week than
Mm-hmm.
the past. So it would have been really nice to have a nice meaty topic like Donda. Alas, we are not. We don't have it.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you didn't tune into the live stream that went on in Apple Music.
I did not. I've caught up on like 2 hours worth of tweets that were tweeted during it though, so I feel like I got the gist. Yes, now allegedly, Apple Music says that the date is August 15th, but
Uh,
much like Pablo, the date is subject to change. So
yeah.
we're just waiting.
Yeah, we're just waiting. Some funny stuff came out of that live stream though. The levitating out of the stadium, Kanye running around with the like big long cloak on. But my favorite part was probably him wearing the spiky, what was that, like a Gucci outfit or something like that. Just showing it off in front of the camera. A lot of great memes came from that. Though, I sent this tweet to you, and it showed Kanye sitting in that little stadium in that little room in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, recording vocals for the
Hmm.
new album, and it was just like, this album ain't coming anytime soon. Yep. That's when the clown paint especially came to mind, because I just was like, I really thought this might be coming when the live stream started, but then nope, not happening.
Yeah,
So
no chance. So we'll be waiting. Hopefully, it does come out. It feels like it will come out. This isn't like Yandi where it's gonna get dated and then disappear. Feels like it will come out eventually. But August 15th, I'm no more confident in that date than I was the past two. So it just needs to be in my hands for me to have any belief in it coming out.
yeah, well, whenever it comes out, we will be talking about it. So if you're watching on youtube.com/nostalgiapod, hit that subscribe. If you're on soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod or listening any other way, make sure you follow us, especially at Twitter at nostalgiapod, where we talk about things that we don't get to on the podcast. Dave, we're gonna start somewhere that feels like Groundhog Day a little bit, because um there's been a lot of optimism as things have started opening up over the summer. Vaccination rates rose quickly and now have been kind of petering out, but still, inching towards numbers that scientists believe will help with herd immunity of some sort. But COVID numbers also rapidly rising now. And the first major festival of the fall festival season, which is kind of just the only festival season this year, has been canceled, which is the New Orleans Jazz Fest, citing concerns about rising COVID numbers, with the festival only being about 5 or 6 weeks away. I mean, is this just the start of all the dominoes falling and things being canceled and shutting back down again, you think?
Yeah, it sounds very possible, right? There was a lot of criticism of Lollapalooza, which went on without a hitch like normal and thus had lots of hundreds of thousand people packed in as this festival should be. And in New Orleans Jazz Fest case, a state like Louisiana, which already has a very low vaccination rate, perhaps not the best idea, especially in the organizer's part when it comes to liability. So you understand why it came up. I think the New York Auto Show in the city canceled this year right after the vaccine mandate came out, but nothing else seems to have been canceled at this point. And in terms of like things that would get canceled, it's probably just the festivals that have been dated because all like the big arena tours have largely been planned to start in 2022 as is. So it's really just these festivals that perhaps might end up in limbo. Governor's Ball, um, Bonnaroo, Outside Lands. There's a
Firefly.
bunch
Yep.
coming up.
Yeah. It's it's kind of hitting that critical mass time too, right? Where I think starting mid September these festivals are supposed to start going off. I think Bonnaroo might be the weekend, like middle of September ish, like maybe like the 16th or something like that, and then Firefly Governor's Ball the next weekend. Like they all kind of happen in a row, and so man, it's feeling like this is kind of a critical point. I just don't know what these festivals can even do. Like you can have all the testing you want. Can you really mandate vaccine? How are you going to track that? Like the logistics of it all just
Yeah.
feels impossible.
Yeah, no, there's no way. How can you this feels like a waste of time because people will just circumvent it anyway when it's
Yep.
at that scale and there's no like unified electronic way to measure that. Like I remember the comeback Foo Fighters show at MSG, I believe, was vaccine required,
Mhm.
like 2 months ago, whenever that was. That was a while ago now. And that was much more easier to handle. But like something at this scale is just kind of seems impossible. There's no infrastructure for it right now, unfortunately. So I guess I'd bet against it, but you know, then again, these organizers really want this money to stay because they really need it after not getting anything
Mhm.
last year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some groups just push through anyway. You know?
Yeah, I think the difficult part is going to be how like the big headliners respond, right? The people that don't necessarily need the money, and if they're
Right.
going to say, "I'm not going to perform if you can't guarantee people there are vaccinated or everybody's tested or something along those lines." I think there's been word from at least from the Firefly groups I follow that some of the artists there are putting pressure on organizers to be doing so. So I don't, I just don't know, and I think we're starting to see that also things like the movies are starting to peter out now. Also, Suicide Squad, big movie, was released um, this past weekend in theaters and through HBO Max. So potentially the box office numbers starting to come down a bit isn't something that we should be too concerned about, but something to be monitoring. If people stop going to the movies as well, it could be just a sign that like people are just playing it safe again. I don't know. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
But in movies is much more complicated because it's very like movie to movie thing. But what is clear with all the trends is you're seeing big second weekend drops for everything. So it's like the hardcore enthusiasts are showing up, whether that's comic book fans, franchise fans, like for Black Widow and Fast and Furious, families for Space Jam, or even film nerds for A24's The Green Knight. No matter what it is, you're seeing a big drop in that second week, which shows you that casual movie going is basically non-existent right now, and it doesn't help casual movie going when a lot of stuff is available on premium VOD or even for free on streaming in the case of the Warner Brothers movies. So movies is very complicated still, and you're seeing more positive things and negative things depending on what the movie is. So there's a lot to get into there. But yeah, I mean, the movie theater box office comeback is very, very slow. That goes without saying. Just look at the data.
Oh, man, I just hope if you're listening to this and you've had hesitancy to take the step to protect yourself and get vaccinated, like please do your research and take that step. Because I personally want to have these things. I want other people to be able to enjoy these things. Another year of no concerts, middling movie success, just something I don't know if I could. I would feel very good about. So, get vaccinated. Do your research. Um, anyways, Dave, why don't we move on to some things that actually did happen?
Yeah.
Donda didn't happen. Jazz Fest not happening. But Abstract Mindstate is happening, and or did happen at least. And what a what a surprise, right? That this was um this group that hasn't released music since 2005. Back then they were gearing up to drop this record,
Mm.
and they broke up. And one half of the group went on to become a behavioral analyst and kind of started working this day job. Another member of the group started, stayed in music, working behind the scenes with Kanye. But now Kanye, not giving us Donda, but giving us a new abstract Mindstate album where that he fully produced. Pretty cool. What was your just like initial response to all of it?
Yeah, very cool, very unexpected. I was not someone who's really familiar with Abstract Mindstate. Like you said, it's been what, over 15 years since they've released new music, and independent artists that kind of ran out of momentum and importantly ran out of money to continue their careers at the time, and thus took a step back as performers. It was very interesting to read up on this. There's a great story on Complex by Andre G about all this, and uh, this duo, Old School Ice, the male in the group, he actually became an A&R specifically for good music, which is not something I was aware of. And they just kept referring to himself as a music industry veteran that was very anonymous. People didn't know him. Um, in particular, it points out that he was the one who picked out the beat for Big Sean's My Last and convinced him to do that song
Mm-hmm.
with Chris Brown, which of course was the breakthrough hit for Big Sean, who was probably the most successful straight up good music signing. We know how fraught that label has become, but I think that was a huge win for them. And just reading about this story is very interesting. And then I think like something that's more I think relevant to people right now would be that all the beats for this album, this Abstract Mindstate comeback album, all these beats were made during the 2018 Wyoming sessions by Kanye. And they were out there at the time making this album. He had produced like 100 beats for them specifically as part of that big recording session. So it's just kind of cool to see this come together now, because again, like no one really expected it, and I'm sure industry people knew about them being in Wyoming, but I certainly didn't really see it remarked upon all that much. So it's cool to have this now.
Yeah, it's really cool to be getting it. It's also probably something we should mention that Kanye is using this as a way as like the jumping point or the
Mm,
first project off of a new label.
yes, Yeezy Sound.
YZY. Yeah, Yeezy Sound,
Mm,
YZYSND. No vowels anymore. That's just the way he rolls. So
mm,
uh
third
which
eye.
is kind of an interesting choice to take this, Chicago independent group that not many people have probably heard of, who are at least probably our age or younger, um, and kind of use them as a jumping point. But the fact of the matter is, this album sounds really great, and
Mm,
it makes a lot of sense that these beats came out of that Wyoming session because I mean, not only did we hear about how much Kanye was working during that time, and how he was just kind of he was producing for everybody. Yeah, Tiana Taylor, Nas, who we're going to talk about today, made 2 albums himself. It sounds like these sound like they came from that. They sound like things you heard on Kids See Ghosts or Yay. Like the chopped and screwedness of these beats and the samples and all of it just feel like they're from that time, and they really I think mix together like an old school sound, but that still
mm,
sounds somewhat updated. It's pretty impressive, I think, and makes me excited that maybe we're gonna get something kind of similar out of Donda. And it's hard to I guess I shouldn't be jumping right to Donda from all this, but it's hard for me to kind of take apart Kanye, who's obviously the most relevant artist we're talking about in this conversation,
mm.
even though this is an abstract mind state
Yeah,
project. So
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it would have been cool to have this come out as the fifth album during that
Hmm.
2018 run of good music albums, just because all the fanfare and attention, it would have been really great for them. But either way, again, reading that story on Complex, it seems like Abstract Mindstate views this as kind of like a bit of paying it forward on Kanye's behalf, like a bit of like creative altruism. And Kanye just had like really good motives about making good art and just really being invested in them after, I believe, uh, they reconnected, and the old Abstract Mindset mixtapes helped inspire Kanye during that time. Again, the anecdote I didn't know about, but that is nice to see. Just because, and perhaps they were sitting on this for a while and waiting for Kanye's next thing again to again kind of like elevate this. That's how
Hmm.
I'll choose to think about it anyway. That's pretty cool. And apparently, they also recorded 27 tracks during that session, meaning they have enough for another project still.
Yeah.
And again, not something they were used to doing as independent artists that were on a tight budget back in the day. And
Hmm.
Kanye was like, "No, I want more. Let's keep making more." So it's very interesting to read. But even if you don't really know any of that context and you just listen to this album, uh, it's just like you said, really good beats matched with really good technical rapping. It has a great throwback, but also timeless vibe. And yeah, talk about a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I think that that timelessness of it that you mentioned is right, and we're gonna kind of it kind of leads into the way I feel also about uh, King's Disease 2 that we're gonna talk about in a second. I feel like there's like this like old school, but things like this could have come out at any point between probably like
Hmm.
1997 and now, I guess. Which
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
if we had heard this from anyone else other than Kanye or an artist who's a little
Yeah.
bit more old school, I would have
Common,
been like,
common from
"What's this?"
Chicago as well. You definitely hear some common vibes here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was hard to like almost like pick out my favorite tracks because they are like the parts I like in it are sometimes just like the samples that come up out of nowhere, and I'm like, well, is this really my favorite track because of Abstract Mindstate or just because I think this is great production? Like the song I Feel Good. When you get that James Brown sample coming in all of a sudden, it's just like, oh, how can you not like this song all of a sudden? It's just like
Yeah.
such a perfect like chop right there. So um and what track stood out to you, or what were like the moments that you found yourself enjoying
Yeah,
most?
I feel good stands out to me. I really like the Wise Tale as well. The whole thing sounds really great. Um,
Mhm.
and because the production's so layered and it's also sample heavy as we expect from anything related to Kanye, of course, rewards multiple listens. But yeah, it's just, much like you said, yeah, as you're getting at, much like the Nas album, it's refreshing to hear older artists, older rappers still sound so inspired, still sound so good, So uh, sounds really good. Kind of reminds me of how like early pro era used to sound, where it's like, wow, these young kids, they're so traditionalist and interested in the past. That's so exciting and cool. Obviously, Abstract Mind State, hardly young kids by any stretch, but uh, you can definitely sense the hunger. And when when you know the story about how they were uh, not performing for so long and they come back
Mm.
and still sound so, I think, uh, re-energized or refreshed by this Kanye production. It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Just real quick, what did you think of like the one time Kanye's vocals show up on this on Brenda's song?
Yeah, it sounds like older Kanye,
It
2018 Kanye.
does. Yep.
Like he's putting the full rhymes together. This is not the "Na Na Na" remix with the baby Kanye song.
Yep.
it's fully formed, which is like refreshing, which is shows you what kind of sad state of affairs we were in overall with Kanye.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Just a couple of the songs I wanted to shout out. Um, I thought the track Elevation stood out. I thought the vocal sample on that, just kind of like like looping it back, was a really nice touch. I also really enjoyed the guitar sample on My Reality, which also I thought had some of the best storytelling and like um, just straight like personal lyrics on the album. Um, and I think the last track that really stood out to me was Expository Mode. Just thought that it sounded really cool with like a toned down like jazz drum in the background. Just really like a nice, like you said, these songs feel timeless, and I think that's what I really took away from this was just like the music slaps, but you could have told me that this was an album from 2001. I would have been like, oh, makes a lot of sense. So
Mm.
I really enjoy that part. Any other tracks stood out to you, or are you ready to move on?
No, I think that's all of it. But again, like this is not something that's going to get a lot of commercial attention, so it's just cool to see it get platformed like this. So really cool.
Absolutely agree. And we're going to move on to talk about King's Disease 2, as I mentioned prior. And Nas, he's working, man. We got King's Disease 1 last year, 2020. So he's working, dropping these albums. And of course, just a little bit before that, we got the album he collaborated on with Kanye during those Wyoming sessions we just were talking about.
Mm.
So he's been putting out music. And I think, at least from what I remember, our takeaway from King's Disease 1 was that, especially after those Wyoming sessions, Nas sounded a bit more inspired, and a bit more back to form on King's Disease. So I
Yeah.
think we were pleasantly surprised by it. Did that continue on King's Disease 2 for you?
Oh, it definitely did. And that's very exciting because King's Disease 1, which I thought was very good and definitely very good per late period Nas standards, ended up being Nas's first Grammy winning album. Wins best
Crazy.
rap album, Nas's first Grammy win. Crazy to think about given he's in his late 40s. And yet King's Disease 2 comes out. I believe this is actually a little less than a year later, about a year later. And I think this is really effective. Notably, the second time Nas has released two albums in a year. And I think this is a lot better than I Am and Nostradamus went, particularly Nostradamus,
Mm,
of course, as everybody knows, being a bit of a mess per Nas standards in the 90s. But this, Nas seems, he just seems so almost like casual. Like he's like so like low stress, but still quite ambitious lyrically. I thought King's Disease 2 sounded great. And he seems to have found something with his collaborations with Hit Boy, who
mhm.
executive produced both King's Disease albums. They seem to really bring the best out of each other, which is really cool. And yeah, I think Nas sounds awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, the smoothness of this album was the word I wrote down. It just sounds like, I think the effortlessness that you alluded to. He just sounds like he just like rolled out of bed and was like, "Oh yeah, I had this idea for these songs. Let's just do it." And like he's not even trying that hard, and it's coming out this good is really impressive. And, I was like similar to what I was just talking about the Abstract Mindstate. I was trying to like pick a song that like
Mm,
really stood out, and I guess there's a couple. Like I think Rare might
yeah,
be the
that was
track
good.
that I like the most. I like Death Row East a lot.
Yeah,
I thought Nobody stood out with Lauren Hill, kind of just taking over the second half, but that like saxophone like transition between verses and lyrics, I really enjoy. Anyone that's listening knows I like a good saxophone. But overall, I just feel like it's just like consistently quality throughout.
yeah,
There's a couple of moments where I'm like I don't want to hear Eminem. I'm sorry, like
yeah.
I don't need to hear him at this point. I know what I'm getting.
Notable for it being their first time both rapping on the same track. I believe Eminem produced a Nas song way back, but for their first time performing together. But yeah, like a lot of late Eminem, he doesn't make any fucking sense for half the verse. It's like, what the fuck is this?
Hmm. Yeah. So there's a couple of moments maybe don't hit as much, but pretty much from start to finish, even like looking down the track list, like My Bible and Not Nas is good, like or
Yeah, it ends
strong
strong.
finishing.
Yeah,
So um, this is just a really high quality album, start to finish. It's interesting because, and I hate that I'm couching everything with Kanye, but Kanye is someone who I think has had a really hard time transitioning into this next part of his career gracefully, and that's
yeah,
kind of I think what we expected with Kanye. Like he was never going to like just fade into the old man rapper without kicking and screaming. Nas really feels like he's kind of finding this space similar to where Jay-Z got to with 444. Would
yeah.
you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's so great about it too, because it seems like Nas is just getting a lot of flowers right now. He wasn't quite getting a lot of them once like Jay Z just became the commercial force that he was in like the 2000s, and the Nas albums stopped being quite as the main event that they were. Like around like Hip Hop is Dead, I guess. Like at that point, like
Mm,
Nas is like an OG, but he wasn't like still being rapidly consumed as he aged, whereas Jay Z was. And it's really cool to see Nas like just getting so much love because he's earning it because the music is really good. And I mean to pull out a Lauren Hill feature in
yeah.
2021, really really exciting. I thought she sounded great.
Yep.
Just the sheer, I mean, that's rare than getting an Andre feature like that's big news, honestly. Um, and yeah, I think my favorite song on this would be Death Row East.
Yeah.
Early, and I memorable for the production. Hit Boy's doing a lot of like record scratching on that, which sounds really cool. Always sounds timeless, despite the data reference that it would be. But I mean, the comment that Nas is making about his role in the East Coast West Coast beef in the '90s, leading to the death of Biggie and Tupac, is I think really cool to see that kind of like old man reflection in the
Sure.
song. And then of course you get the sample of the Nas show where they stopped the show to announce that Tupac had been killed. Of course, um, a little eerie to hear, but I thought that song was quite memorable.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that really stood out, and I think obviously ending with that like actual recording of the announcement, it's almost kind of like in a way like hearing or watching video of when like Bobby Kennedy announced that Martin Luther King was shot when he was on stage at a campaign rally. And I know it's like kind of different levels of like people in that case, but just like that kind of like moment is just so jarring. Really, really interesting to hear him rap about it. And yeah, I agree on Lauren Hill. I thought she sounded awesome, like I mentioned before. So um, definitely check this out. We've already added a track to our Nostalgia Best of 2021 playlist, so go check that out. Any last thoughts on this, Dave?
I'm curious to see if he gets another Grammy nomination. That'd be kind of wild if Nas started running it up. Last year at the Grammys, they notably nominated lots of more traditional rapidy rappers, of course,
Mhm.
headlined by Nas, who won, but also Freddie Gibbs, D Smoke, I forget who else. It'd be wild if like Nas gets nominated back to back. That'd be pretty funny.
I I think there's a very good chance of it. We'll talk about when we get to our Grammy pod down the line, but
Yeah, in the fall.
let's let's move on to Tinashe. Uh, we talked about her last in 2019.
Yep.
Songs for You, an album I think we both enjoyed and were impressed with, and felt like she was an artist really starting to find herself. And 333, I think, was a interesting moment because she's done with RCA. This is an album she's
Mhm.
really taking full control of.
Yeah. Well, so is
And
Songs for You. This is their second independent
oh, okay.
album. Yeah.
Um, and I think then to kind of change it up because I actually thought Songs for You was on RCA. I think my enjoyment of this can go up a little bit because it feels like she just is continuing to like explore herself on this.
Mm.
And you mentioned the easiness that Nas brings. I thought the easiness that Tinashe brought to 333 and just like jumping between sounds, switching things up, and making it all feel like really effortless and just like a piece of her was really impressive. And I thought this was a really enjoyable listen. Um, what was your takeaway from 333?
Yeah, sonically, it was not quite what I expected. I really like Songs for You. I thought there were some really fun, bouncy tracks on there, like Link Up and Hopscotch. And in general, it just seemed like Tinashe was, doing what she wanted to do, as opposed to trying to be melded into like a traditional like R&B pop star or something like that. And now on 333, it's a bit of a switch, right? There's less like capital B bangers like there were on Songs for You, songs that she's really good at making. But it's more of like this like silky R&B. But I think the key difference is that there's just some new production from her in terms of songs she's writing. Like Unconditional is a K Tronada beat of all people. Like you wouldn't
Mm,
have expected that. And then
no.
what is it? Undo parentheses Back to My Heart, very like
Yeah.
synthy production, just also new. And she's a good singer. And I think what's interesting about this is she's not, it doesn't sound like you said, effortless, right? She's not like trying too hard. It's like intentionally still light on the performance side. But because the production seems to be quite tactful in its newness per her output, still leaves a very interesting impression. So, yeah, not what I expected at all, but still pretty good.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes her almost a really exciting artist at this point is it feels like she's just kind of trying things and finding what inspires her or what she wants to be doing, and it's all working. I think that's the piece, like, right? So how many times have we reviewed an album where we're like, yeah, we hear them trying some things and they're gonna figure it out. Well, it feels like feels like she just tries things and they just sound really good.
Yeah.
So it's really impressive. Undo was one that really stood out to me. It has that like dance poppy, like stroby feel
Yeah.
to it almost, which I thought was great. And then that's followed up by Let Me Down Slowly. I think either the next track or a few. No, it's the next
Hmm.
track. And I thought those two back to back were just really delightful. What other songs stood out to you?
I really like one of the singles, Pasadena, which features
Mhm.
Buddy, who's a rapper I like, and both Tinashe and Buddy. They just really rode that beat well. I thought that one just sounded really good. Um, and then the title track, 333, uh, kind of a more sparse beat, but Tinashe's performance still manages to stand out, even though again it's not like a super showy like bout of singing or anything. And then the feature on that absolutely definitely gave me some like Doja Cat vibes. I was not expecting to hear that. Um, and I actually thought if you had Doja Cat on that song, it would have been a perfect fit.
I'm sure we'll probably get the remix at some point. Um, it's funny. I was thinking about like how I would almost describe this album to someone, and it feels a bit like Doja Cat meets like Japanese breakfast, like mashed
Mm,
together almost in a
yeah,
sense. Like it's hard to like pin down the sound completely, but just like this like pop bubblegum like lightness that just really is a pleasure for your ears. I wanted to shout out Small Reminders as a song. The bass guitar in the second half of that song, it like has like a switch up moment, and the bass just goes off on that, man. It almost kind of reminded me a little bit of at the end of I Love Myself by Kendrick when the
mhm.
in the live version that bass just goes like super hard. Just really enjoyed that. And yeah, I think you mentioned a lot of them. Just this was a album that I think subverts my expectations for her because it feels like she's just going to continue to rise and experiment, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. I gotta say, like we talked about a lot of female R&B artists because there's a lot of notable ones right now doing lots of good stuff. But I think it's really rare that I'm like super like surprised with what I hear. There's a lot of like convention right now what you get from R&B and B and like alternative R&B. And this is, as you said, kind of hard to classify, which is really cool and definitely a far cry from what people were expecting from Tinashe when she was kind of in the doldrums of her run with RCA. Like her early mixtapes before like Tuan became that big hit for her. Her early mixtapes maybe suggested this, but we hadn't seen it manifest in so long. And I thought Songs for You was really good, but like you could hear the convention there too. Not that that's a bad thing, but the subversion still really like grabbed me. It's like just not what I expected. And I've been a fan of Tinashe's songs for a long time. Even the RCA stuff had things to like. So you can tell that she's not super interested in pursuing like mainstream commercial
Mhm.
appeal with this album, and that's cool because that's her choice. So do what you want to do. It's
Absolutely.
it's definitely working.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, check that out again. Nostalgia Best of 2021 on Spotify. Give it a follow. And Dave, let's move on to a movie I didn't get to, but I know you did. 9 Days. I wanted to get to it, just didn't have the time. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I just saw 9 Days, which is a film that played at Sundance 2020, the feature film directorial debut of Edson Oda, and it just came out 2 weeks ago. Sony Pictures releasing, got a wide release last weekend, and very, I think, simple premise, very simple movie to wrap your head on what it is. Our main character is Will, played by Winston Duke, and Will lives in this kind of purgatory land, which was shot in Utah. So it's like in the desert, a house in the desert. And Will, in this purgatory, he's like a middle manager. He interviews souls and asks them questions and has them do things over the course of 9 days. And when those 9 days are up, will decide which soul gets to move on to live an actual life. Go to life, go live. And they won't remember this whole 9 day process, but they'll still be themselves. That's kind of the crux of it. And he's got an assistant that helps him out in this process, played by Benedict Wong, and he kind of sits in his little house there, interviews his people. When he's not doing that, he's kind of watching the people he's granted to life in the past. And it's kind of like very specifically like all on uh, CRT televisions. He's watching VHS tapes of their lives, of the people he's selected, and takes notes on what they're doing. And he's very invested in his decisions to that point. And we kind of watch one of these 9-day processes go, and you get some notable actors trying to, interviewing for their lives in a certain sense, played
Hmm.
by Bill Skarsgård and Tony Hale, and most notably by Zazie Beetz.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, the first 30-40 minutes of the movie very engaging when you like understand that presence and learning about it. And it's a lot of just talking in rooms, conversations, and people espousing their thoughts in that regard. So it's a lot of like thinking when you watch it. And as you can imagine, very existential stuff, literally, what is the meaning of life? How do I
Right.
want to live? All the things you can imagine would come up with this sort of thing. And literally Soul's talking. We just watched Pixar
Right.
Soul. We just recently talked about A24's The Green Knight. Existentialism and purpose are common film themes
They're in
these
right now. I
days.
like it.
Yeah. However, 9 days gets quite dull, and
Oh no.
I was not pleased with how the movie ends. It's a great premise, great idea for a film. And I actually saw some reviewers suggest that maybe it has amazing potential as a play, given that's really just a lot of talking,
Hmm.
stage play. But as a film, I really stopped being wrapped, and I thought it was a dull end, and
Ugh.
I kind of got a little frustrated with it. So I don't really want to spoil much. Not there's a whole lot to really spoil, but ultimately, it just the conclusion, execution of the conclusion, I don't think matches the intriguing potential of the premise. So I would still recommend it if that type of movie is your thing to have an opinion on it. And generally, it's being well reviewed, like in a letterbox. But for me personally, I thought it ended up being a little dull. So
Hmm.
still cool. Like even if it's a miss to me, it's it was a nice swing. So I'd
Yeah.
be interested to see what Otis' next movie is because clearly he has ambition.
Yeah. I love the premise the way you laid it out. It sounds super interesting. It's disappointing to hear that it fell a little bit short or maybe didn't land totally. I was wondering about Oda's like just eye because I'm looking at the background. If you're watching on YouTube, it's this like desert with like this like really bright yellow sky and like this like dull like whitish sand color with Zazie Beats and I'm guessing Winston Duke
Yeah.
having a conversation, and it just looks amazing. And even the cover, which is my background on YouTube, it's just like the sky with like this little like uh, thing in the background, in the background, this little cottage or whatever.
Mhm.
And it feels like it looks like there's like a lot of like big sweeping shots in this. Is that kind of what he went for?
Honestly, there's not a whole lot of that. Like, despite being
Interesting.
shot in Utah, you don't get a lot of it till the end. We're really in the house like the whole time, especially in the
Interesting.
beginning. Yeah, and because of that, you really have to have be carried
Tight.
by the script, and like it's a
Yeah.
good showcase for the acting. I think the acting is good. Winston Duke is notably like I don't want to say neurotic, but notably like measured in his performance,
Hmm.
which to me wasn't like as cool to see when he's playing like Adobe Dad in Us or M'Baku physicality in Black Panther. Like this guy is like, all right, well, this Will dude, he's kind of a tough hang. It's like very like by the book in his process about these questions. And Zazie Beetz is a good foil
Interesting.
to him because she's like very unwilling to like play the game
Hmm.
that he lays out for her in terms of the prospect of being selected. So yeah, visually though, it's like not like probably the most intriguing stuff is the way they kind of show you like all these CRT televisions stacked on top of each other, and you see all these moving video feeds and stuff. But yeah,
Interesting.
it's an intriguing swing for sure, but didn't work for me in the end.
With such a stacked cast too, I mean, young and upcoming actors, I think we like for the most part. It almost feels like, and I don't know what his character was like, but Skarsgård might have actually been better for the Winston Duke role a little bit.
It's a good point. Yeah, he's good at what he is, and he brings his quality as well. He was a good choice, and yeah, he
Mhm.
could have done it as well. Like you wouldn't have expected this from Winston Duke in terms of like I'm just picking an actor for this role. I wouldn't have picked him first. That's for sure. But yeah, they're all good. Like Tony Hale, also
Yeah.
good performance as having comedic element to it, uh, but it still fits the everything going on with the movie. So also a good selection. And Benedict Wong, he probably brings the best moments of levity to the film. He's just like getting Will to like lighten up even for a second. So yeah, yeah, 9 days. Check it out. It's in theaters now, or it'll be on streaming eventually. And definitely, definitely a movie I think worth having an opinion on, just because again it's so existential, and for some people that it's really hitting, but not for me.
Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out in the near future. But as I alluded to at the beginning of our pod, Suicide Squad came out this past Thursday on both HBO Max and in theaters. Um, what Suicide Squad came out in 2016, the original 2017?
Correct. August
Yeah.
2016, same year as
Jeez.
Batman versus Superman.
So 5 years. 5 years it's been. And there was talk of a sequel right after the David Ayer original Suicide Squad. Him and Will Smith went on to make Bright, and then they were supposed to get right back to making a Suicide Squad sequel. But I think the reception to the first Suicide Squad um, may have had something to do with the decision not to make a follow up right away. And I believe Ayer didn't want to do it eventually after all of the critical reception. Is that right? If I'm recalling, I didn't write this down, but
Yeah, well, yeah, well, he also eventually everyone was towing the party line in 2016, but once people realized the movie wasn't any good, things started to come out,
right.
and notably that the movie was hacked to shit by Warner Brothers, and whatever movie David Ayer did make was not the one we got to see. It was heavily cut after various test audiences and reshoots and yada yada. Again, this is
That's
two
right.
Warner Brothers film regimes ago at this point, so not an indictment of what they do today, but uh, you've seen release the air cut trend in the wake of the success, we could say, of the Snyder Cut uh, reboot of Justice League, as it were. And I think the problem with everything about the Ayer cut is that David Ayer hasn't like shown that he's like in the best space to justify this in the wake of Suicide Squad 1. You mentioned Bright, Netflix film that got some eyeballs on it, but is not liked as a good movie. You can
Yeah,
double
and
that for The Tax Collector, which came out
yeah,
last year, released by David Ayer, which is quite bad. And I just say, like, if you've seen The Tax Collector and you've seen Bright, how can you really be that invested in what the original vision of this movie was? And it's also moot because they made a reboot pseudo Suicide Squad 2 anyway, of course, just out from James Gunn. So it's a weird legacy, Suicide Squad
mhm.
1. And even though it was critically panned and not even well liked at all, it was disliked. It still made a lot of money, 746 million worldwide. It actually had pretty good legs for a movie that everyone said sucked.
Yeah, and thinking back to, I mean, the parts I remember disliking were some of the Harley Quinn and Joker stuff.
Mm.
I think Leto's Joker is just so polarizing and hard to take a hard character for some people to really get into. Some of the dialogue was just really bad. Obviously, the movie, like you said, was chopped to shit and just with nonsensical points. But I also just remember um, Cara Delevingne's character. I'm
Yes.
forgetting the name. Just being such a
Enchantress. Yeah.
yes, Enchantress, just being such a terrible
Yeah. Sucked.
aspect of the movie in
And,
general.
and on side of that, you have like these like faceless husk, like cannon fodder villain
Yes, yeah.
characters. It's like there's just so much like unlikable like extraterrestrial stuff going on when it's really supposed to be a super high concept thing. It's
Mhm.
all these bad guys, these criminals hired to do a job together, like the Dirty Dozen. Like it's
Mhm.
supposed to be quite simple, and to have like Enchantress doing all this magic shit as a corrupted villain, like just completely incongruous to what you think the movie should be about. And now that there can't be extraterrestrial stuff going on, it does not get in the way in Suicide Squad 2, of course, the Suicide Squad. But for Suicide Squad 1, it was just such a mess. Like, I mean, do we even need Jared Leto's Joker at all in that movie? Because the character's
No.
barely in it, you know? So
Yeah.
a lot of issues with it, but it's also honestly just completely old news at this point because it's
Yep.
a relic of the past regime when it came to the DC films.
Definitely. And we mentioned that Will Smith and David Ayer didn't come back, and uh, we only get a handful of people who come back. From the original one, we
Yeah,
have
four
Margot
people.
Robbie, Jai Courtney, Viola Davis, and
Joel
um,
Kinnaman.
Joel Kinnaman as Colonel Rick Flag.
And
Uh,
Courtney dies really fast, so it's really only three people.
yeah, that's. I think that's the thing is this movie really subverted my expectations. It got super weird. Um, it has a really awesome beginning, I think, that just kind of like
Yeah.
basically like throws you for a twist right away. And it ended up I think working on multiple levels, beyond it being a good superhero action movie. I think it actually had some larger meaning and some real takeaways in terms of like heartfelt moments. And yeah, I was pretty impressed and um glad that we finally got like a successful Suicide Squad film. Did you feel the same way after watching?
Oh yeah, totally, totally. Like it does so many things right. I mean, it has lots of good humor, as we've come to expect from James Gunn franchise movies with the Guardians films, of course. R-rated R, so there's a lot of like, ultra violence going on, but it's I think all still pretty good. And perhaps most I don't know, probably the best part about it as a film is like it doesn't like get in the weeds of what it is, despite like covering a lot of ground. Like it's super easy to understand premise in the beginning, like what the Waller stuff in the prisons, like super fast, bad guys, bombing their heads, do what I tell you. Like you get everything super fast if you don't
Hmm.
know what's going on or anything. And like I expected a lot of those characters to not make it in the beginning, but to really see everyone wiped out right away, and then you get like this really cool like title card and like the smoke or blood, whichever one it was, and we switch to the actual squad we're going to be hanging out with in the
Hmm.
beginning for our title card. Like it really effective start.
Yeah, super effective start. Also, I was pretty devastated when the Weasel died in the beginning. Now, I mean, this is a spoiler review. The Weasel does end up not dying at the end, which I was happy about. But yeah, I I was like so I did not expect to see it the way that we did either. Because it's gory ends for most of them. Like
Mm,
Pete Davidson's character's head gets just like completely blown in half. It's crazy stuff. Very gory, but I enjoyed it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and then I think seeing the actual squad kind of come together, them retrieving Colonel Rick Flag and that whole thing, like it ended up. I it's hard to like walk through it because I almost feel like it's like hard to explain. There's a starfish that is an
Starro.
alien, yeah, alien from outer space and is enormous and being kept as a undercover as a
Mm,
American weapon or like a worldwide
yeah,
weapon that they're
there's some great comment on American foreign policy as like
oh
pretext for
totally.
this movie. About like imperialism and like hiding bad stuff going on in other countries. Like it's not subtle by any means, but I think it's still really
No.
effective as just like part of the film. And yeah, you meant like Starro, Project Starfish. It's like it's
Hmm.
there's no secret where it's going, but it's a CGI filled third act that like it's not garish. It doesn't make your eyes glaze over. It's really still riveting and awesome.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of like, really cool how much momentum there was in this movie start to finish. Like you mentioned the scene where they get flagged, like it's played for laughs watching them slaughter a bunch of good guys like the guerrillas, the rebels in this fictional South American country. It's like man, it's just really funny, and like I think the
Yeah.
chemistry of the squad is done really well, and it's, you have the Harley Quinn factor going on. I think it's the best Harley Quinn movie of the three, or Harley Quinn like role of the three.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much to like about it. I didn't expect to have Rick Flag, Joel Kinnaman's character, like characterized and colored in this movie to the point where you're actually invested in him, and then when he gets killed, you're like really sad about it. Like I didn't expect that to be a feeling I had, but yeah, we had yet we had it.
Yeah, I was thinking, is this the best like Kinnaman movie? Like the best role he's had in a movie?
In a
I'm
movie,
trying to
maybe,
think.
yeah, because like he breaks out with The Killing TV, makes a big
Hmm.
impression in House of Cards TV,
Yep.
and then he's had a lot of movie roles that are up and down. RoboCop didn't go anywhere. Suicide Squad 1, obviously not his best showing. Not that it was his fault.
No one's
Um,
best showing. Yeah.
yeah, I thought he was really good in this, and like he actually can
Yeah.
handle something like the late comedy too, which he just wasn't even given a chance to do in the first one.
Yeah. No, and I'm thinking about the scene where they go to break Harley out, right? And you have an awesome Harley Quinn moment where she basically just frees herself,
Yes, not
plays
a damsel.
dead. Yes, exactly. And you see him in Bloodsport, played by Idris Elba, like sneaking across the street, and like just how funny that visual was, like not being like subtle at all. And then she comes up behind them, it's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you? Why are you here? She's like, we're here to save you. She's like, oh, I'll go back in. Like, it's just a great like back and forth moment. But yeah, I thought he played that so well, and I mean, I laughed when I said Colonel Rick Flag because I think from the first movie, I just was like, this is a total joke. This role, like, just
Yeah,
kind of like shepherding the bigger stars from one scene to another. It's like not a good look for Joel Kinnaman. He gets real work in this, and it's really
right.
nice to see him like kill it when he gets it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I really liked it because I liked him in House of Cards a lot, and I think he's
mhm.
good. So I'm happy to see this. I also really love John Cena as Peacemaker, and like the
Right?
turn you get for Peacemaker, I think is really effective. Like I said, you get invested in what happens to Flag, and that's of course due the result of Cena. I have to say, like, it's just such a good use of Cena's talents as an actor. I think back to Blockers, the comedy from 2018, where he's one of the
Yep.
dads. It's the kids going to prom comedy, and he's also hilarious in that. But this, like, he has the physicality. We know that, obviously, given his roots, but he has really good comedic timing, and it's just a great use of his talents in the Suicide Squad, and just really brings back how little of an impression he leaves in Fast Nine, where he's
Oh yeah.
playing someone who's not comedic at all. I think between like Blockers and this Cena, this is like great performance. And like we just talked about The Rock last week. In terms of actor wrestler alums. It's uh, I think this is like have you been impressed with The Rock at the level that you were just impressed with Cena as Peacemaker? Because I don't think I have been.
I mean, the Rock is just like a completely like his own entity at this point. He's bigger than movie stardom. He's
Yeah,
probably going to
he's
run for
himself.
president someday. It's just like
Right.
it's always
Most
the
followed
Rock.
person on Instagram.
But Cena, yeah, I was really impressed, and I also thought just like perfect casting as this like superhero, but also like grimy, like real just
Hmm.
a tool for the American government's like
Yes.
ill will, which I just perfectly
I
cast.
love peace, and I don't care how many people I kill to keep the peace, or whatever he says.
Right. Yeah, I was really impressed with him, and I thought him and Idris Elba, getting to Idris Elba as Bloodsport, pretty much the Will Smith replacement.
Yeah, very similar to
Um,
Deadshot in terms of
yeah,
skills.
yeah, and also kind of like
They even have a kid.
attitude.
Both
Yeah,
had a kid. Both have attitude with authority. Like very
yeah,
similar. I mean, at one point,
basic,
Idris was going to be playing Deadshot, and they decided to switch it up.
which I think is
But
the right call
definitely the right
for
call.
sure.
But character-wise, it's still very very familiar.
Yeah, and I,
You know,
I think
reluctant leader thing. A lot of tropes.
right, and I think he gets the most to work with, obviously being I guess you could call him like the leading star of this, alongside Margot Robbie. Those two seem to be like the two that were kind of billed as the top people. But him not only growing into that reluctant leader role and kind of finding how to like push all the right buttons and you know, actually building camaraderie with these weirdos, but also, he gets to be funny. Like him and uh, John Cena's character Peacemaker going back and forth about like who's a better shot. Oh, I shoot smaller bullets, and my bullet would go through your bullet thing. Where they're like flipping each other off as they're like walking around during the mission and stuff like that. Like it all really worked for me, and I, I've been I think Idris Elba is a really talented guy, but I don't always think his roles really grab me, and I don't always think he really like kills him. I think sometimes he puts in some performances that maybe just don't work for me. I thought this totally worked, and I kind of expected it not to going in. My expectations for Suicide Squad were pretty low to begin with, so I was like, we'll see if this really is a solid Idris Elba role, and I thought he was just phenomenal. So, really impressed with that. Did you like his performance?
I did. I did, yeah. Idris just has a certain charisma as a performer that is always there, even if like the role doesn't totally work. Like his role in Molly's Game always comes to mind. It's just
Yeah.
kind of like a messy role, and also him trying to do a American accent didn't seem to work. This time they let him be British, and they let
Mhm.
him just kind of stick to his strengths, and it works really well. Um, you know, casting wise, I actually loved Sylvester Stallone as Nawe, King
Yo,
Shark. Um,
King Shark stole this movie, dude.
Obviously the Groot character in this
Yeah.
James Gunn film, and Stallone, a Guardians 2 alum, so you get the
Mhm.
connection there. But Stallone was really good because there's more lines for King Shark here than there were for Groot, obviously. And yeah, just really funny, and you're rooting for him. And I was like really concerned that he was going to die, like when he was getting shot by all the M16s at the end there, and then
Mhm.
like
When all those
you're
like fish creatures were
yeah,
biting
so
him, I
you're
was like,
invested
bro.
in King Shark, which is not some which is it's
Going in, you wouldn't
testament to
have
the
thought that.
movie. And like reading about the film, there were no reshoots for this. James Gunn had a clear vision, and that's why he
Yeah.
got everyone to sign back on for this, because they really liked his script, and you could tell how you know clean cut it was. And like to pull off King Shark, to pull off the Groot thing twice is just kind of a miracle.
Yeah. And I mean, I left that just being like, I would die for King Shark. He's just a phenomenal character. Um, you know, it's funny because I feel like I almost want to talk about every character here, and I don't
Yeah.
want this to be like an hour long pod just on Suicide Squad, but Polka Dot Man, another
Yes.
character I thought was going to be super stupid and lame, and obviously that's kind of what they were going for. Totally sucked me into it, and he ended up having a nice arc. Obviously, Ratcatcher 2 had a really
Mm.
nice arc, and some nice flashback moments with Taika Waititi. I think especially like a nice like emotional cap at the end with those two in terms of like the what the soul of
Hmm.
the movie was. But we got to talk about Harley Quinn, man. I mean, we
Yeah.
we kind of danced around it, but you said this is probably the best Harley Quinn role, I guess. Like, would you say
Yeah.
better than Birds of Prey?
Yeah. I mean, between those two, obviously, I think it is.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like everything she's doing works. Like it's still like a lot. Like early on, it's a lot of Harley by herself. She's not with the rest of the Suicide Squad for most of the
Hmm.
film. But it didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel like a side story at all. Her whole thing with the romance with the dictator guy and how she kills him. Everything about that was great. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that I really liked that scene when she kills him and she has like the. I always told myself I had saw more red flags. I'd murder them first. Just like so good. Also, I didn't necessarily see that coming, which I thought was like a nice little twist. I
Yeah.
mean, I assumed she would probably not end up with the guy, but I didn't expect it to be something like that. Um, yeah, this feels very true to the Harley Quinn character, and I think Birds of Prey. She was really thrust into more of a like that reluctant leader role like you talked about, but also just like badass role. And here she got to be there were multitudes to Harley, which I really liked and thought that was good. Um yeah, and then I mean I guess we didn't really talk about the villains that much, but did you like the was it
Starro.
Starro? Did you like Starro?
I love Starro. I also like how they like contextualize Starro as like this
Yes.
guy trapped, and he has these ambitions. Like when he dies, when he's like, I just wanted to look at the sky again or something. It's
I
like,
was
oh fuck.
happy just looking up at the stars, man. I was like,
Yeah. It's
oh,
like, oh no. yeah, you were just
Scarro.
murdering people and shit, but oh damn, maybe we should just let him go.
Yeah,
Honestly,
you're just misunderstood.
and I was actually reading he has a decades long history in the comics and just kind of cool potential. I think how he grows and stuff. And yeah, for a CGI filled third act, you never get this riveted. You know, like
Yeah.
it's rare to see it land this way, but it really does. Um, Shout out Daniela Melchior, who plays Ratcatcher too. She's a Portuguese actress who is pretty unknown in Hollywood. I think her biggest thing was that she was the voice of Spider Gwen in the Portuguese dub of
Mm.
Into the Spider Verse. So she'll definitely get a lot of bigger looks now. And you mentioned Polka Dot Man. He's played by David Dasmalchian, who I've always liked ever since he has that really small role in The Dark Knight as one of the Joker's
Yep.
henchmen, because he's a really noticeable face and all that. So
He does.
the whole
Yeah, that
ensemble is really effective in the Suicide Squad.
yeah, I mean some of the like most well-known people in this, Pete Davidson
Mm.
killed within the first like 10 minutes of this.
Nathan
whole movie.
Fillion, same way.
Yeah. Just really I think just a real win for DC, which is nice. And I think DC, we've been talking about it, just continues to kind of just like find its stride. And I think obviously getting the right filmmakers and just kind of letting them have control and not, doing what they did with Ayers is obviously the right direction for them to be going in. I'm really pumped for the Matt Reeves Batman. I think that's going to be great. So DC, we spent a lot of time in the early days of the pod talking about the DC versus Marvel of everything. I'm glad to see the DC movie universe finding its stride and its own thing. It really feels like they're a separate thing, not competing anymore, which I like. So definitely good. Any more thoughts on the Suicide Squad, Dave?
Yeah, it was disappointing to see the box office was coming in under expectations, sub 30 million domestically. And on top of that, it got a B plus cinema score, which, as we know with superhero movies, is not a good score. And everyone I've talked to, everything I've seen has been overwhelmingly positive when talking about the film. But perhaps it's not, doesn't quite have the same mass market appeal. It is an R rated film, so we don't have like huge box office comps, but at the same time, it also came in under what Birds of Prey did, right as the pandemic was beginning. Obviously, there's so many factors with this, given that the movie was also for free on HBO Max. But I'd like to see DC rewarded a little bit more, given how effective I think the movie is. It's arguably the best DCEU movie, and there's a lot of them at this point, so I think that means a lot. So
Hmm.
either way, we'll get the Batman soon. We've got Blue
Yeah,
Beetle casting news, so Aquaman 2 filming right now, The Flash filming. They're finally getting their shit together. It's nice.
yeah, definitely nice. Just want to shout out this one line reading real quick after some some person in the control center knocks out Viola Davis's
Oh,
was her Agent Waller character. Get
yeah.
on a satellite, Dale, you fucking dickhead. Like what a moment. I was dying laughing at that. And I think that's the other thing that maybe we didn't hit home hard enough. This movie's actually really funny, dude. Like,
Yeah.
it's hilarious at points. So check it out. Go watch it if you haven't. Maybe this will be one of the first movies that has a good second weekend box office because I think it deserves a real win for moviegoers and DC alike. So why don't we wrap up there, Dave? What do we got for next week?
And next we got a lot of stuff, so hopefully Kanye waits a little bit longer because we got The White Lotus on HBO, The Bad Batch finale on Disney Plus, the beginning of Marvel's What If on Disney Plus, the conclusion of FX's Dave season 2, The Little Dicky Show. Apple's big Sundance acquisition comes out. Coda, excited about that. Also in the movie theaters, we get Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic, as well as the Ryan Reynolds video game movie Free Guy, which is getting surprisingly great reviews. And we also get a Killers album. So there's a lot going on.
Woo. A lot going on this weekend. Hit that subscribe if you're watching on youtube.com/nostalgiapod, soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod. You can find all the ways to follow the podcast. And of course on Twitter @nostalgiapod. Stay safe and we'll catch you next week.